Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. As temperatures drop, more and more people will be enjoying their fireplaces and wood-burning stoves. And as it turns out, they're not the only ones using firewood this season. SUNUP's Curtis Hare is with OSU structural entomologist Brad Card to learn more.
During these winter months, many homeowners will start bringing their firewood in to burn, and we're here with our structural entomologist, Dr. Brad Card. And Brad, sometimes that idea, some homeowners need to think about what they're actually bringing in.
That's correct, because firewood piles, even though we all like nice winter fires in our fireplace, when you leave firewood piles outside for an extended period of time, many insects, rodents, snakes, and scorpions tend to inhabit that firewood pile. So when you go out to pick up your firewood and bring it in the structure, you could also be bringing in some dangerous pests into your home.
So let's kind of talk about, walk us through what type of pests are actually out there.
Yeah. Just about everything lives in a firewood pile because it's a nice sheltered habitat. So you have carpenter ants, you have termites, you have scorpions, you have black widow spiders, brown recluse spiders, certain types of wasps live in there. And so you can bring all these pests into your structure at the same time you're bringing in your firewood.
And I think one of the things that might be concerning is you're bringing a lot of those pests that are, might be dormant, bringing them into the house where it gets warm, and then those pests become active again.
That is correct. When you bring your firewood into the house out of a cold environment, most of those insects and arthropods are inactive because of the cold weather. Once you put them in a warm environment, within a few hours, they'll start getting active and they could emerge from the wood. Beetles, scorpions could get active and crawl out on your floor. So these particular animals you need to be aware of. And when you bring your firewood into the structure, you want to be burning it right away. You do not want to leave it for a long period of time sitting next to your fireplace. Some pests are venomous, particularly the brown recluse and black widow spiders. Baby snakes are not very large. They could be 2-3 inches long and the size of a pencil. And they're almost invisible. Those could be venomous snakes. Most of them are not venomous, but they could be venomous. There's thousands of snake bites that occur in the United States every year. About 20% of those are venomous snake bites. And so when you pick up your firewood outside, you need to be careful. Knock the pieces of wood together to knock any animals off. Always wear heavy gloves, leather or heavy cloth gloves. Don't pick it up with your bare hands. And when you bring it into the structure, right into the fireplace, ready to go.
Are there any measures that homeowners can actually do other than just wearing gloves to prevent, this type of contact, like stacking wood, or ways to, just minimize that?
One thing homeowners should definitely not do is stack their firewood right against the side wall of the structure, because that gives the pests in the wood direct access to the structure itself. So firewood should be moved away from the structure at least 3 or 4 feet, but I would prefer 10 feet. It should be elevated off the ground. It should not be placed on bare soil. That for sure would bring in carpenter ants and termites.
And is it important also to kind of cycle that wood out, make sure you're not leaving like 3-year-old wood still sitting there, and just kind of keeping the wood, seasoned but fresh?
Yeah, one mistake that homeowners make is, as they replace the firewood they use, they put it on top of the pile, and then you always use the new wood, leaving the old wood behind. You should always be burning your oldest wood first, because that's the wood that's most likely infested with a pest. So you want to do that rotation off the end of your stack, not just always off the top.
And it's not just firewood that we need to be concerned with interacting with pests. It's wood piles like such as this that are just sitting that many landowners have.
If you have landscape timbers stacked up, some of them may be treated and preserved, but a lot of times the center is infested because that wasn't very well treated. So any type of wood pile or a big burn pile, if you're stacking up your wood to burn it, that's fine. But you also need to be cautious around those piles because they certainly attract snakes and rodents.
All right, thanks, Brad. Dr. Brad Card, structural entomologist here at Oklahoma State University. And if you'd like some more information about what Brad talked about, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, Wes Lee with your weekly Mesonet weather report. Rainfall data shows that December begins the state's driest season of the year. The weekly rainfall from Wednesday backs this up with very limited precipitation across the state. The highest rainfall was 1/3 of an inch at Antlers. One of the main reasons rainfall drops off in the winter is the lack of moisture in the air. Statewide average dew points, a measurement of air moisture, peak in the summer and bottom out in the winter. Without moisture-rich Gulf air, heavy rainfall events are just not likely this time of year. The statewide rainfall to date this year has been very impressive. We are currently at 46.1 inches or almost 12 inches above normal. This chart shows this year's rainfall broken down by months. The dark blue lines are the recorded rainfall and the light blue lines are the long-term average rainfall. We had higher than normal rainfall in 7 of the 11 months. May topped the list with over 10 inches of rain averaged statewide. Oklahoma is not the only place that has been wet this year. The U.S. as a whole has been remarkably wet. The average rainfall to date is 4.55 inches above normal. This comes in as the wettest period from January through November since the detailed records began in 1895. Now here's Gary with more Oklahoma weather information.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, we had another dry week across the state, and you know what that means? More colors on the new Drought Monitor map. Let's take a look. Well, really, it's the same basic pattern we've seen over the last few weeks across the state on the Drought Monitor, except we have more of that yellow color, the abnormally dry conditions, extending over into north central Oklahoma, all the way over into northwestern Kay County at this time. So that does signal areas that we're concerned about going into drought. As we see the rainfall accumulation map for the last 60 days, we see the good rains across the eastern portions of the state, but as we go across the western portions, we generally have from 1 to 3 inches of rain, even less out in the Panhandle. But up in north central Oklahoma, we also have that 1 to 2 inches as we get up into Grant and Kay County. So that's the justification for the expansion over into those areas. And we look at the percent of normal rainfall from that same time frame. Again, we see the less than 50% of normal rainfall over the last 60 days across much of western Oklahoma, but also less than 40% up in the north central Oklahoma, again in the Grant and Kay County areas. Now, one of the pressures we're not seeing right now would be the much warmer than normal air during this cold time of the year. However, as we look into next week, getting very close to Christmas, we do see the outlook from the Climate Prediction Center showing increased odds of above normal temperatures. So that wouldn't be a good thing. So maybe a little bit more pressure on the drought conditions if it does get warm, and also not much of a chance for white Christmas with that kind of weather. But we'll continue to take a look at it. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Winter crops are growing across the state, and Josh, where are we with the winter crop of canola?
Well, we're actually doing better than we could be doing. With as cold as it's been, we didn't really know what to expect as kind of the winter drained on. With as cold as we got really early, we were worried about falling into winter really early, and we weren't really going to have much of a canola crop because it just needed that time to grow. But what we've seen is it getting up into the 60s and all that throughout much of the remainder of November has really helped a lot of this crop, it and the wheat, kind of get a lot of biomass to it in the fall, which is exactly what the doctor ordered, kind of, if you will. And so we're actually doing pretty good. Roots are setting pretty good. We're getting a lot more growth than we expected to. We are kind of getting, as we get into December, we start worrying about when are we actually going to harden off and go into our winter time to where we don't see a whole lot of growth. Not really a true dormancy like we would see in wheat, but we don't see a tremendous amount of growth in canola in these deep winter months. We lose a lot of that tissue. So we want to get as much root mass as we can to make that stores for the next spring. That way we have a lot of nutrients coming out of the spring to allow us to get that spring growth, if you will.
Looking back at 2019, it's been an interesting year for any crop, it could be sorghum, corn, cotton, any of that. Let's kind of break down how 2019 has been for the summer crops.
Yeah, I mean, and now that we're getting things pulled out of the field, we're starting to see the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of 2019. And I think that is how we should remember it, is there's some fields that are really nice and pulled off some really nice yields this year. And there are some fields that are really subpar and really took the hit this year. And it came down to a couple things: planting day, when you got the rains in July, and whether you got the early freeze or not. And basically, if you won out of the lottery on those three things, you had a really good looking yield and things looked good. If you didn't, things started going backwards, and that's universally across a lot of our summer crops.
We're standing in a place where there is canola planted into sorghum. How is that something going on with producers across the state?
Well, not necessarily maybe this rotation, but what we are seeing is a lot of our winter crops that were planted after some of our real early summer crops. This year, some of those that you couldn't even tell that was wheat or that was corn previous, you can tell where our winter crops are that were in summer crops successfully because of, one, how late they were harvested. That rotation where we have summer crop into a full season winter has been a little bigger of an issue for us this year than we've had in previous years. Still a great rotation, but it's, once again, 2019 strikes at us again, and it's one of those challenges that our growers are having to deal with right now.
Looking at a possible 2020 summer crop, what should producers be thinking about as far as a relatively good crop, and then even planting dates following a winter crop, not knowing when we'll get that crop out?
It's true, and depending on how fast we come out of the gate in our winter crop, we'll tell this story. We were really late in our winter crop this last year, so our double crops were late. Now our double crops are, so we ran into a big issue. There's a lot to be said on our winter crops this year. If we have a nice warm spring, everything kind of parses out like we should. It could be a great year to go into a double crop system, but we won't know that yet. And it's hard for me to venture a guess where to go because we all know that money drives so much, and we still don't know what's going on with some of our trade agreements here and there. Our usuals are still good. I mean, there's still a great market for soybean. We see the cotton market is still really strong. Things that I'm hearing around the landscape is sesame is really strong this year. Good demand for sesame. So our sorghums and our corns and our cottons and our soybean that are typically there are still good. They're still viable. All of our summer crops look really strong. What happens with politics and trade, that's yet to be seen, and that's something I can't comment on, but that will drive a lot of decisions we have. All of them are still viable. It's just what inputs might we have to go without and which ones we need still.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Josh Lofton, Cropping Systems Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
We're here now with Dave Lalman, our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist. Dave, you get a lot of questions about cubes made from distiller's grain. Let's kind of start there. We're going to sort out some other things too.
Sure. Those are a relatively new product on the market in agriculture. They've only been available for a few years. And the reason they're recent, the technology has improved to produce we'll call it a decent cube out of a feed product that's really high in oil. Any feed products that is high in oil does not generally make a very good cube because they just won't stick together. But they've overcome that with this technology improvement. And so now, over the last 2 to 3 years, the availability of these has continued to grow.
What kind of guidance do you have for folks who are using those specifically?
So we have conducted considerable amount of research using distillers' products as supplements to forage-based diets and beef cattle. In the research that we have done here, distillers as a supplement for cows has always competed well if you deliver the same amount of protein compared to the traditional supplement source here in Oklahoma of cottonseed meal.
So let's talk about what we have here and kind of talk through the qualities of these and what people should consider as they're making these choices for their own herds?
Okay, well, so what we did was gathered up, the feed mill guys helped me gather up some samples for you, and this is what you'd consider the standard, kind of the standard cottonseed meal based high protein. So on a dry matter basis, nearly 45% protein. These, on the other hand, are another Oklahoma product that's very traditional and common. There's some cottonseed meal in these. These are 20% cubes, so you know, approximately half. So these are the distiller's dried grains with solubles based cubes. They're a 3/4 inch cube rather than 1/2 inch. And these are going to be primarily that byproduct distiller's grains. They're for something that's 10, 11, 12% fat or oil, those are pretty nice cubes. You know, generally, historically, we would not, this would be a bag of crumbles, you know, if you tried to make a cube out of something with that much fat.
So what is the criteria as folks look at their options and then make a decision for their operation?
Well, so based on the research that we've done, we think that as far as the protein source, it's a pretty equal decision as far as protein quality, as far as the cow is concerned. The protein in the distillers is going to be less degradable in the rumen, but that protein that gets beyond the rumen to the small intestine is highly digestible there. And then the nitrogen that gets digested, nitrogen from the protein, is able to recycle back to the rumen to supply the rumen microbes with nitrogen, regardless of whether it gets digested in the rumen or later in the digestive tract. So it's the cow's pretty good at equalizing things, and that's kind of how our research turned out.
So adjust it as needed for your particular operation.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, Dave Lalman, thanks for answering all these questions. Good information. Thank you.
Through the years, I've had lots of questions from producers about using wheat pasture as a winter feed for either replacement heifers that they're going to breed next spring, or in some cases even mature cows. And some of the concern centers around the fact that wheat pasture very often is very, very high in protein, and some people have had the idea that excess protein might be detrimental to reproduction in these cattle. Let's do the study. And in fact, that was done here at Oklahoma State University on this very wheat pasture several years ago. Half of the heifers were moved to another facility and put on a self-fed growing ration. So half of the heifers stayed on wheat into and through the breeding season. The other half, 3 weeks prior to breeding, were moved to a dry lot and allowed to go through the synchronization and breeding in dry lot. What we found in that situation was that the heifers that were out here and stayed out on wheat, we had a higher percentage of them cycling at the start of the breeding season. When we went through the timed AI, we found out that there was no real difference statistically between the two groups. In fact, numerically, the heifers out on wheat had a slightly higher AI conception rate, as did those that were on that dry lot situation. And then when we looked at the final pregnancy rate after all the heifers had been exposed to cleanup bulls, there was really very, very little difference. Again, the small advantage went to the heifers that stayed out on wheat during the first part of the breeding season. Also, Kansas State University took a look at this only with mature cows. They had 5 years worth of data on mature cows that were allowed to stay on wheat during and after the breeding season compared to their counterparts that were on native range during the breeding season. And they've really found very, very similar kinds of results. In this case, there was a little bit of difference between the conception rates. The conception rates in this case for Kansas State was a little bit higher for those on native range. It was only just a few percentage points. And again, when they checked the entire pregnancy rates after the breeding season was completely over and they'd all been exposed to cleanup bulls, the pregnancy rates were virtually identical. In both situations, we concluded that we can run these cattle on wheat pasture into and through a breeding season, if that's what's available to us, without expecting any real drop-off in terms of their ability to get bred, to maintain that pregnancy, and do rather well. If we have wheat pasture that's available to us, then I think it's a possibility to be used, especially on replacement heifers, as we go into that early part of the breeding season, which may occur in, say, mid-April through mid-May with replacement heifers. Hope this gives you an idea of how wheat pasture might be used for breeding cattle this spring or any spring. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Everyone's getting ready for the holidays, so Kim, can they expect any cheer in the markets?
I don't think there's much going on in the markets right now. You look at corn, they're near their lows, slight downtrend, but not much happening there. Soybeans, they've had about a 30-cent rally over the last couple of weeks, but just kind of moving slightly up, but nothing exciting happening there. Wheat's been moving sideways the last couple of weeks. That March contract between $4.25 and $4.50. It's you can go back to the $4 low, so it's on the low end of the range, but sideways. Cotton had a little rally there. It's trading between 64 and 67 cents. The bottom there was 58. Just not much happening in the markets, and that's normal over the holiday period.
The December WASDE report was recently released. Is there anything in that report that producers should be aware of?
Not much. You look at corn, there's essentially zero changes in the corn, either domestic or the foreign markets. In wheat, there was a little news there. They increased export projections, especially for hard red winter wheat. I think that's good news. They lowered U.S. wheat ending stocks for this year. I think that's good news domestically. But if you look at the world, production was flat, but they lowered production estimates for Argentina, Australia, and Canada. They raised them and offset those declines with Russia and the European Union, and they raised the world ending stock. So I think the negative news in the world offset the positive news in the U.S. If you look at soybeans, no changes at all for U.S. The world, a little bit slight increase in production, a little bit lower ending stocks, but nothing there. And essentially no changes in cotton.
What about in regards to the export markets? What's going on there?
Well, if you look at wheat exports, it's going relatively well. Hard red winter wheat right now 25% above last year's estimates or last year's exports. The corn, there was some good sales in corn and soybeans this week, so the export markets are for wheat, I'd say relatively strong, and for corn and beans, probably as expected. You
know, usually this time of year, as we're about to start a new year, we always ask you, should producers make any changes to production practices?
Well, they should always evaluate how they're going to use their land, labor, capital, and management. If you look at what's going on in the market, I don't see much change coming up for any of the commodities, so I'd look at what we got now and make the allocation of where I thought I could make the most profit.
All right, thanks, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Today I thought that I would share some interesting facts about chocolate. The Aztecs believed that chocolate was a gift given to them by the god Quetzalcoatl, and they held chocolate in such high regard that they used the cocoa beans as a form of currency. Chocolate is made from the beans of the tree Theobroma cacao. Theobroma means food of the gods. Cocoa beans are grown in West Africa. Cocoa beans are also grown in the Central and South American countries of Brazil and Venezuela. The first chocolate bar was made by Joseph Fry in 1847, and the Hershey Chocolate Company was founded in 1894. Both milk chocolate and white chocolate have standards of identity established by the FDA. Milk chocolate is a combination of chocolate liquor, cocoa butter, sugar, and milk or cream. I should mention that the chocolate liquor is not an alcoholic beverage, but a mixture of cocoa solids and cocoa butter in approximately equal proportions that has been melted. White chocolate is made from the same ingredients as milk chocolate, but without the non-fat cocoa solids. The FDA does not have a standard of identity for dark chocolate. There has been some preliminary research that has suggested that eating dark chocolate provides health benefits because of the presence of antioxidants known as flavonols that are found in the cocoa. However, these compounds are present in very low concentrations in comparison to the relatively high amount of fat and sugar. In other words, it's still probably a good idea to consider chocolate just a treat. So remember, the next time you're taking a bite out of a chocolate bar, you're enjoying an ancient food of the gods. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or fapc.biz.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. A reminder to be sure and tune in next week as we take a look back at some of our favorite SUNUP stories from the past year. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.